anytime.
First, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
A lot of what came out in the Panama Papers was not illegal. Should it have been?
Well, the issue on the Panama paper in this case that people have an account in outside jurisdiction. Not all of them illegal. It could be legal. But I think the most important is actually this affect trust. When the countries see that some of the leader, elite, or in this case the rich people have the account outside, and they start questioning why, and they're asking about is it really the legitimate reason, or is there anything hiding? Then there is quite a lot of derived question, which is very fundamental for many countries. Not in a developing country, you can see that even in an advanced country. So the good side about this revealing this paper is actually now opening up even more the discussion at the global level. I was finance minister before, so I know about the tax avoidance, how hard for a country, even if you have a good intention, good policy. But sometimes you have to deal with your own internal problem, whether this is corruption, weak capacity, and so on. But even if you are doing that without international cooperation, it's going to be very hard to actually chasing this tax avoidance. You can see even here in the United States when each Minister of Finance now have to struggle to enforce what you call it, the responsibility tax compliance.
So wealth is hidden to avoid or evade taxes, and so if taxes aren't paid, why would ordinary people care about that?
Well, this is exactly what I said about the trust. When the tax, definitely country or state government have the role, have responsibility, whether this is in providing the basic services or you have to provide the security of the country, and they need resources. And in that function need to be found from the collection of the tax. And many of in economy, of course, you see what you call it the phenomena of the public goods, which usually the market or private sector are not willing to produce it. That's including the safety, environment, and that's why that the role of state is very important. And that can only be done if they can collect tax properly. So you can see that it is very important from the trust that people will feel that I will pay tax because I trust that the government and the state will provide me with what you call it the function and responsibility, basic necessity, which is going to be provided in order for the people to be able to live, to have their life, to pursue their career, to have this daily interaction, to pursue their dream. And that is what you call it the basic services as well as the public good that need to be provided. So the trust is going to be very important for them to then comply to pay. This trust is important for them to be able to then collect the tax in a very fair way.
There's a lot of concern at the meetings about refugee flows, and all kinds of things drive refugee flows. One of them is a lack of economic opportunity. What is it that the bank isn't already doing that could help increased opportunity and perhaps reduce the flow of refugees?
Well, every time the global environment is always creating also a challenge. This year particularly is very critical. Global economy is weakening. The recovery since the financial crisis is not as strong and it's not widespread. Even more worrying is many of developing countries, emerging countries also weaken. We see if you combine with the issue of this fragility and conflict, then you have this problem, especially in the Middle East. But even in many countries, we see that more than 40 countries in our client countries actually fragile and conflict state. Now, what we could do, some of the source of the conflict, the root of the conflict is actually purely economic or, in this case, inequality. So we have to provide this kind of policy response from the government or correcting the inequality so that they will be able to actually pursue, especially among the youth. And this is what we try to do when we do in the Middle East and North Africa. The basic principle that we are doing in engaging with the government now is try to build the social trust. And this is not only through the functioning of the government again in providing basic services like health, education, but also in creating more better environment for job creation, whether this is private sector or especially from the supply side, that is the labor, have the ability to have a skill that they can enter the labor market. So the World Bank now is doing in helping many countries, in this case, in dealing with this conflict and refugee, including innovating on a financial instrument in order for us to be able to help country who's actually now carrying the burden of refugee. This is not their fault, but they have to absorb as well as to manage. And don't forget, refugee actually can stay longer in a country. According to our study, they can stay up to 30 years in a country. So they will require a development program rather than humanitarian temporary program to receive refugee.
You have written that closing gender gaps in opportunity and pay and so forth will boost the economy. I mean, it's not just a matter of equity, it's a matter of good economics. You say that Brazil could grow 14% more, Egypt by 25%. What are the nuts and bolts? How does that work? I mean, is it a matter of you're putting all of your most talented people fully to work, or is it more complex than that?
It's more complex than that, for sure. We have what we call it the gender and law, which is actually survey in more than 170 countries in the world, identifying many barriers from the legal side for a woman to work, to be actually to even having the access of finance or even owning an asset. That is one thing. I mean, the logic is so simple. Half of the population is women. And if you are not doing enough or not allowing these girls and women to pursue their education, to get a job, then you are actually seeing that half of the resources being wasted. And so this kind of the statistics is just showing if they are going to allow to work, the labor force increase, then the economy is growing higher and better because it's become equal, become inclusive. So the upside is not only that you are going to have a higher growth, but you can get a better quality and inclusive growth by putting the gender dimension. We just launched the new strategy of our gender, focusing on the area which is continue on a human capital, because girls usually lag behind, and this is coming from the very early stage of their life, even getting birth certificate in this case, up to the early childhood and then primary education and go on to the secondary and higher education. Then you're talking about their access to the capital or asset in this case. That is their ability to have even an asset under their name so that they can borrow. That is not always taken for granted for many countries. They have a lot of the, what you call it, a legal impediment or even obstacle to do that. And then you are talking about the voice and agency. That is that the woman or girls is not going to have an equal opportunity or voice to be heard, that including the parliamentary as well as the government representation, whether the number of ministers in the cabinet or number of parliament in the cabinet. The point is that the bank now try to pursue this, what you call it, gender inequality by focusing on what is really the obstacle, and then we try to measure the result, so that with that kind of evidence and work, we will present it to the world, to the country, especially those who are still not convinced about this potential economic and social importance of creating an inclusive growth is going to matters most for many countries. So this is what we are now doing.
Is your career evidence that, you're the second highest ranking woman, you're second highest ranking person at the bank, the highest ranking woman in the history of the bank. You've put one heck of a dent in the glass ceiling. Do you think young women look at you and say, I can do that?
Well, when I traveling, some girls, they say that. It's really a real reward for me that they see the example and they see that if Sri Mulyani can do it, why can't I? Or in this case, even when I saw a man and they say that I want my daughter to be like you, that is something which is quite rewarding. But I think, yes, it is still a long way to go for me. I mean, I was the first finance minister in Indonesia, a woman. which I think that's inspired a lot because people feel that the area of finance is usually dominated by men. And when you can do the job in a way that you can show that we can deliver, we can do the job equally good or even better, then it will provide not only evidence that women can do it, but also to provide this the inspiration. I always give an advice for any woman and girls. Push your boundary. Even 1 inch, that's not only matter for you, but matter for the rest of the woman or girl in the world. And that's, I firmly believe that, because we have to push the boundary in so many ways that then give the inspiration or example, because that is what is really needed in many of the front of battle that many girls and women have to face.
China's going through, trying to transition to a services economy, trying to stop being the workshop of the world and kind of move up the food chain in a way. A very sensible thing to do, but it's been pretty rough. China is so important that a problem there becomes a problem for everybody else. How can China's businesses and its government do more or do something differently to make this transition faster, less bumpy, more gracious, or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Well, second largest in the world in economic size, China. Definitely whatever happened in China, just like in the United States, will have the implication to the rest of the world. I think China is undergoing the changing of their development model or growth model, which is in the past 30 years has been very successful, relying on export and investment, into more relying more on the consumption and domestic sources. And it's about the time, with the size as well as the magnitude of the economy that they are having. The changing on this growth model is going to have quite a lot of implication. I mean, first, which is for their own interests, that you can produce the same level of growth with less energy intensity. That will matter a lot in terms of consumption of energy and pollution that they're having. You can do better in more sustainable way. You can change from the excess capacity and investing in a manufacturing low-level job into a more high-value-added, high technology. You change from all the surplus of savings being used by the state-owned enterprises into more household income so that people can spend. And that will require a good health system, the pensions, so that people feel confidence. I mean, from the balance sheet point of view, this change can be described easily. From the real political, economic, social point of view, it's going to be quite complex and delicate, because you really try to change those people who's been working their career in the manufacturing. Now they have to shift into services sector, which is not easy for them, and that will really require retraining. I think this is going to be one of the most important phenomena in the global economy, how China will change. Many countries really want to learn from China, and because of their very successful in reducing poverty, very impressive in terms of growth, but now they have to change, and they want to see it in a more smoother way, both socially and economically, because there is a huge dimension globally of what is China doing to the rest of the world.
Going back to Indonesia for a moment, their external debt hit a high recently. Is this a particularly difficult time for emerging economies, developing countries, to cope with external debt? And why would that be?
Well, Indonesia is not among the highest in this case, if you can call it. The debt to GDP ratio is actually declining quite steadily since the financial crisis, 97, 98. So this is not a country which is facing with a debt crisis or a debt level which is alarming. But many emerging countries in the world is now facing with the double source of threat. First, from the weakening global, so external threat, the weakening global economy, commodity price, which especially for a country like Indonesia and any commodity producer like Brazil, Peru, or even Nigeria, is going to have the implication in terms of the revenue of their fiscal, but also in terms of their ability to diversify away from overly dependent on a commodity. So many emerging countries have to make an adjustment. As of now, after the global financial crisis 2009, they use quite a lot of policy buffer, we call it fiscal and monetary policy, to minimize this global shock. So they perform very well after 2008, 2009, so until 2013. After that, the global economy still continue weak, and many of these developing countries is running out of their policy buffer, and that's why you have this weakening globally. So what needs to be done for many of these policymakers? They have to do the structural reform. That's why the World Bank now facing quite a lot of demand from many of our client countries. They're not asking money. We provide, of course, resources in terms of lending, but they actually asking about what is the knowledge and the technical knowledge, know-how about how the reform could be done. Whether this is in terms of improving revenue, for example, we are doing in Egypt or we are doing in many other countries like Nigeria that they want to improve revenue, better governance in managing their oil sectors. They want to protect the poor, especially when you change their economic policy, even with a good intention. It can have a negative implication for the poor. So the bank can provide our experience, financial support, how you design the reform in a better sequence, while you need to do this necessary adjustment, but at the same time protecting the poor. We provide the social protection, how the adjustment can be minimize the burden, especially for the most vulnerable part. So this is the theme of the current spring meeting, especially or this year, I must say, because many of our client countries are now facing with this challenging task.
One last question, and if you could answer in Bahasa, I would appreciate it. Basically the same question. Mm-hmm. What is it, Indonesia has significant external debt. What is it about these times that makes it difficult for emerging economies to repay external debt? And if you could answer in Bahasa, I would appreciate it.
Indonesia bukan negara yang sedang menghadapi krisis dari sisi jumlah hutang yang dimiliki. Tidak dalam hal ini menciptakan suatu kondisi yang akan menyebabkan krisis. Indonesia perlu untuk memperbaiki kualitas growth-nya, karena seperti negara-negara yang lain, developing country maupun emerging countries, pada saat ini Indonesia dan negara-negara berkembang menghadapi global economy yang dalam kondisi melemah. Dan itu menyebabkan banyak sekali implikasi terhadap kebijakan yang harus diambil oleh pemerintah untuk bisa menciptakan ketahanan atau diversifikasi di dalam ekonomi. Broaden atau lebih lebar, lebih inklusif, dan lebih sustainable. Hal ini perlu dilakukan untuk memperbaiki komposisi ekonominya sehingga tahan terhadap shock dari luar dan menciptakan kesejahteraan yang lebih merata kepada masyarakatnya. Persoalan Indonesia pada saat ini sebetulnya lebih kepada inequality, yaitu semakin banyak atau semakin besar jarak antara mereka yang memiliki income maupun kekayaan. 1% sekarang memiliki hampir 50% dari aset, atau 10% orang atau kelompok terkaya mengkonsumsi lebih dari 50% di Indonesia. Dan itu harus diselesaikan dengan memperbaiki service delivery atau jasa yang diberikan kepada masyarakat miskin terutama, sehingga mereka memiliki akses pendidikan, kesehatan, maupun akses terhadap nutrisi. Dan ini adalah suatu proses yang perlu dilakukan oleh banyak negara di dunia. World Bank banyak sekali mendukung negara-negara yang saat ini mengalami kelesuan ekonomi, baik secara regional maupun global, melalui financial support atau dalam hal ini adalah keuangan, maupun juga dari sisi knowledge dan technical assistance. Sehingga banyak negara bisa belajar mengenai bagaimana mendesain suatu reform lebih baik, secara lebih sequential, dan terutama yang paling penting pada saat harus melakukan reform, bagaimana memproteksi masyarakat miskin. How to protect the poor. Karena dalam perubahan banyak sekali terjadi kebijakan-kebijakan itu bisa memberikan beban lebih banyak kepada kelompok yang paling lemah. Dan oleh karena itu, belajar dari reform di banyak negara, World Bank bisa mensupport negara-negara yang melakukan reform untuk melindungi masyarakat miskin. Pada saat yang sama, pemerintah juga bisa melakukan perubahan kebijakan agar perekonomian lebih berdaya tahan atau resilience dan lebih inklusif.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.